Well, now let's turn to a build along with David Rarick. And David, this is his third segment on building Paul Egrie's service station. David, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. I'm happy to be here. Today we're going to start on the third build session. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will get the right one up. Did that come up?
That came up. Just throw it into slideshow mode. Just click the slideshow up and down towards the left.
Yep.
The one that looks like a screen. Yeah, just.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. Now this I don't understand. Maybe you can tell me this. It says this thing up. Please move it away from something or other.
I have no idea.
I don't know. It always seems to do that, and it kind of straightens itself out.
Try clicking on the slideshow icon again there. Click on that one. Would it give you a pop-up that said something?
Yeah, it says, please move this window away from the shared application up the top. Any idea what does that?
I have no idea what that's.
I mean, it's red printing in a black window here. It says, please move this window away from the shared application. I'd love to be able to move it away, but I don't know how to do
I don't know what it is. Just, yeah, unfortunately, don't know at this point how to solve it.
All right. Well, let's just proceed with the slideshow. Yep. All right. This is a service station that was designed by Paul Egrie, a friend of mine from Pittsburgh. And we did two parts of the build. Tonight, we're going to do the third part. Where we left off last week, the building itself was pretty well done, the walls and such. So this week I'm starting into some of the finishing touches, if you would. I decided I wanted to put some internal lighting in this building since it does have an interior. I bought a snap battery, 9-volt battery snap connector and a switch from Evan Designs, and wired that into a piece of the strip light that I used on my layout construction. These are generally used for like under counter accent lighting in kitchens and stuff like that. They come in a roll. The ones I bought were 5-meter lengths, or like 16.5 feet. And there were 300 of these LEDs on that strip. And I think I paid about $15 for the strip. So that's a very inexpensive way of getting your LEDs. And you can cut them into 3 LED segments. They have the dropping resistors already installed. It's on a thin tape, you can see here. And there's a pressure sensitive adhesive strip on the back, which you can use to stick it onto your building or whatever. I actually glued mine in place because these strips I salvaged from part of my layout lighting, and the pressure sensitive tape had already been used and reused and messed up, so I just glued it in.
David, have you moved on from slide 1? Because we're not seeing anything except that.
Yeah, I have. Okay. Let's see why this resume share. We'll try this.
You know what, I would suggest unsharing and resharing if you don't mind.
We'll try it. Now I'm not getting that to come up. Oh, here's stop share. Try it again. I'm not sure which one did he use now. This one maybe. All right, what are you showing now? Anything?
That's slide 4, and it's full screen.
All right. Yeah, okay, I guess it's working now.
Much better.
Okay, here we go. So anyway, as I was saying, here I added internal lighting. I used a 9-volt battery connected to light strips, which these are cut off a 16.5-foot length of under counter LED light strips. And like I said, they cost about $15 for like 300 LEDs. And cut them into 3-segment strips. Here they are lighted. Pretty reasonable cost when you think about it. 300 LEDs for 15 bucks. They're designed to be run off a 12-volt DC power source. I use a 9-volt battery, which does cut the brightness down a little bit, which is probably good. These are a warm white color. And like I said, I removed them from part of my layout lighting because I found that they were too yellow on my layout to be taking pictures. So here we cut a notch in the top of the internal office wall so we can pass the wiring from our battery into our lights. We're going to take a little diversion here. Here I'm making the post that go under the front overhang. And I decided to try a new technique, one that I've never done before. Since I had printed all the design pages up on that pressure sensitive label stock, I thought, I'm just going to try wrapping that around a square piece of wood. So I found some 3/16 square balsa in my stash. Rounded the corners a little bit so it'll be easier to wrap the paper around it. And then I cut the label out and removed the backing and then just wrapped it around a stick. No fuss, no muss, no glue. I used my burnishing tool to burnish it down so it was stuck fast good. Hasn't come off yet, so maybe I'm okay. I trimmed that off. The nice thing about doing this is it provided a square guide edge by wrapping that label around there. So I knew exactly where to trim the balsa and how to get it square on the ends. You might need to trim them a little bit to get them to fit between the overhang and the service island. It should be really close the way they're drawn, but dry fit again before you glue them in place, just to be sure. And here you glue the post into the corners behind the fascia and against the ceiling of the overhang. I just pretty much eyeballed mine, but if you have crooked eyeballs, why you might want to use a square. Check to make sure that they're vertical or perpendicular to the ceiling. And after I had those glued in place, then I ran a bead of tacky glue all around the bottom of the building, bottom of the walls. And placed the building on the base. And then you can see this weight I put on here. This is a chunk of solid, I think it's bronze. I'm scoffed up from my shop days when I was teaching high school. And here you can see I leave that weight on there, and that's to hold everything down firmly to my build table. Prevents any warping, twisting, what have you. Once that glue sets, you're not going to get any movement. I decided to use the alternative cornice trim strips that Paul provided on the drawings. Not sure where he got these from, but I just decided, well, it might look all right. So I took the print and I glued them onto a piece of poster board to make it just a little bit thicker. And I ran another copy and cut just this trim strip off the top, glued that on also onto the poster board, and then laminated those two together. When you do that, you end up with a piece that's about 20 thousandths overall thickness. And then you want to make sure that you color around the cut edges with a marker or a pencil or whatever you have, something that is close to the same color as the front. And then I took and I glued that trim strip over top of the fascia board and made it so that the top of that strip was right at the bottom edge of the signs that are on the side. Glued it in place. And I did the same thing with the side walls, made a strip same way. Now here is the subroof I made. This is not part of the drawing, if you will. This is a piece of chipboard. I realized that the printed shingle roof is actually longer than what's required for the building. And I didn't want 4 feet of overhang on either end. So I measured the overall length of the building and then made it 1/4 inch longer on each end. So it turned out to be 7 inches overall length. And I made the width so that it would match the width of the shingle cover piece. And you can't see it here, but I cut halfway through on the center line so that it would fold in a sharp bend. And I took one of the printed gable walls, cut it out as a pattern, used that to cut 3 additional braces out of chipboard that I could glue to the underside of the roof. These are cut so they fit inside of the side walls of the building and extend down into the building somewhat. And I drew these guidelines on here so I could put them in square, glue them in place, make sure you get the point right in the center, because otherwise it's not going to fit. These need to be in from the end far enough to clear the glue tabs on the end walls. And you also need to clear the interior office wall with this brace. You could add as many braces here if you want. I put 3 in, you put 4 or 5, whatever you want. After the first sign was set up, I weighted it down and propped it up on the back side here and glued it in place on the opposite side wall. And if you see that one of the braces is out of line, now's the time to take it out of there and redo it. Because what will happen is if they're not all lined up, when you try to fit it onto your building, one of them is going, say if it's the center one is over too far this way, it will interfere and it won't sit down on top of the building the way it needs to be. Okay, now I glued these light strips onto the inside walls in a position where they can't be seen by looking in through the windows. I could have used a strip of cardboard, placed it up underneath the roof, but I decided this was much easier than trying to actually cut a strip and glue that light underneath it, and route all the wiring and everything else. So I just made it up on the walls. You see, I put 2 strips in, one for the front office wall and one for the garage section. This is just a piece of chipboard here I put in place. That's just to hold the battery from moving around inside the building, because the battery sits back here inside. Okay, now take that subroof, place it on top of your building, make sure that it sits down inside, and that there's no light leaks. As you can see on the end gables, you don't see any light coming out here, even though the lights are on. So, you know, you got a pretty good fit. Then I took and I used the only paint on this whole building that I used to color the cut edges and the underside of the subroof. Why did I use paint? Well, ever try to color a white color with a marker over top of chipboard? It just does not work. So you have to use either a color like this, a model color paint, or you know, any kind of hobby paint would work. Or you could use you know, acrylic paint from, you know, a dollar store or whatever. Just something to color it light so that it is close to the same color as your sidewall and your trim strips. Now, when I looked at the nearly complete structure, I decided it would look better with a third post in the center. So for this post, I used my normal building method, which is just using folded cardstock. First of all, I want to cut it out and then score the fold lines on the inside or the back side of the paper. Because if you score it on the front side, it's liable to crack, and you'll see a white line where your paper cracked. You might be able to use a mini press brake like I had that paper clamp. That is helpful in getting these bend lines straight. Because bear in mind, these are only 3/16 of an inch wide. So there's hardly enough room that you can stick your fingers in there or anything else. Then you gradually form it into a square post by wrapping it around, and tuck the glue strip inside, and then just kind of massage it a little bit. Try to get it square. Look at it from the end. You can see this one isn't quite square because the glue strip isn't pressed in quite far enough. This can get a little tricky trying to get it actually square, which is one of the reasons I did them on pieces of strip stock. What you want to try to avoid is getting a trapezoidal effect where this end is pushed in further than this end, because that just throws the alignment completely off on your post. Now you have a nice square post, test fit it under the overhang, then glue it in place behind the fascia and to the service island. And if you don't have a good fit, make a new post and start over. Easy enough to do when you're working with cardstock. Now comes the fun part, making those dang gas pumps. I folded the first one around and realized it was going to be pretty high. So first thing to do is cut about 3/32 of an inch off the bottom of the pumps. Okay, then score it on the back side right here where the side meets the front and back, and then carefully cut around the drawing. And this is what you'll end up with. Here you can see a strip I cut off. And you'll fold those front and back pieces 90 degrees back, and then bend that side piece and the top that bends all the way around. I found that if I used like a toothpick or anything, a small round object, that I could use it to bend around to form that curved top on top of the pump. And your pump sides, top, fit between the front and the back. Here's what it looks like. Glued it in place on the service island, and there's your first gas pump. And I also took and glued the shingle roof printout on top of the subroof. And I just use tacky glue to do that. And the lights are on, as you can see. You can see in the interior pretty well. I've not made any furniture yet. That's going to come in the next session. So I wanted the signs to be a little brighter, stand out better. And I also thought, yeah, I'll make them glossy, make them look like a tin sign. So I printed them up on some coated Epson presentation paper, sprayed a couple coats of clear glossy enamel over top, and cut them out and edged around the outside with a marker. This is how they look before they're glued in place. The paper I use is about 5 thousandths thick. And I use a scissor when I'm cutting round like this because it works much better than trying to use a knife. And there's our building. I glued all those signs in place, glued the additional pump in place. And there's the 4 signs, 4 sides of it. So it actually looks like a building now. Any questions? Next session, start up at number 4, and I'll make some interior furnishings for it. We'll mount it on a base, maybe put a little scenery around it. I even spent a bunch of money and bought some HO scale vehicles and people.
Dave, I've got a question.
Yeah.
First of all, it looks fantastic. I'm assuming since the battery is inside behind that wall, you don't have the roof glued on. It's just sitting there.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct. Plus, I wanted to be able to take it off so I could furnish it inside.
Yeah, that too.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions for Dave?
Is there a light switch?
Yeah. If you go back to my second slide, I guess it was, that clip that goes on the battery that I got from Evan Designs, that has a little push button switch wired to it. So yeah, I have to take the roof off to turn the light on, but it's just a push button. Then you pull the roof off, turn it on, stick the roof back on it.
Got it.
Supposedly, a battery will last about 40 hours of running LEDs. I haven't tried it. I don't know how long it'll last. But if you want to take it to like a show or something like that, I think probably it would last most of the show. And if it doesn't, just pop another 9-volt battery in there.
Well, David, thanks so very much. It's a beautiful structure. Looking forward to
Thank you.
next week.
Thank you, Jim.